The Buddha taught that suffering does not come from age, but from clinging to what cannot remain. The body grows old by nature, yet the mind suffers only when it refuses to accept change. When attachment weakens, fear fades. When craving quiets, peace appears by itself. Stay with this teaching, because understanding this truth is how old age becomes gentle. Seeing impermanence ends the fear of old age. The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent. This truth is simple, yet the mind resists it throughout life. From childhood to old age, the body changes without asking permission. Hair grays, strength fades, senses soften. None of this is a mistake. None of this is punishment. It is the natural movement of existence. Old age becomes painful when the mind demands that the body remain as it once was. When youth is remembered with longing, the present moment feels lacking. When the mind compares what is now with what has already passed, dissatisfaction quietly grows. This is not caused by aging itself, but by misunderstanding its nature. In Buddhist wisdom, fear arises when we cling to what cannot stay. The body was never meant to be permanent. The Buddha did not promise lasting youth, lasting health, or lasting form. He pointed to impermanence so that the heart could become free. When impermanence is clearly seen, resistance weakens. When resistance weakens, fear loses its power. To see impermanence is not to become sad, it is to become honest. Just as a leaf falls when its season ends, the body follows its own cycle. There is no injustice in this. There is only change when this truth is accepted. The mind no longer fights time. A person who understands impermanence stops measuring life by what has been lost. Instead, awareness rests in what is present. Each breath becomes complete. Each day becomes enough. The body may slow down, but the heart becomes lighter. This is why, in Buddhist teaching, wisdom often deepens in old age. When illusions fall away, peace has space to arise. Old age becomes peaceful, not because change stops, but because the mind stops arguing with change. When impermanence is seen clearly, aging is no longer an enemy, it becomes a teacher, quietly reminding us that freedom does not come from holding on, but from letting go. Letting go of identity frees the heart in old age. The Buddha taught that suffering continues not because things change, but because the mind insists on holding an identity that can no longer remain. Throughout life, we quietly build a sense of who I am. We become attached to roles, abilities, responsibilities, and images of ourselves. We identify as strong, productive, admired, useful, or needed. These identities feel solid for many years, and the mind begins to believe they are permanent. Old age gently begins to dissolve these identities. The body no longer moves the same way. The world no longer responds in the same manner. Responsibilities fall away. Praise becomes quieter. This is where suffering can deepen, not because something wrong is happening, but because the mind refuses to release what it once used to be. In Buddhist understanding, identity itself is a form of clinging. The Buddha pointed out that there is no fixed self behind the changing body and mind. What we call I is a process, not a possession. When old age arrives, it exposes this truth clearly. The pain does not come from losing identity. The pain comes from trying to protect it. Many people suffer silently in old age because they feel they are becoming less capable, less important, less visible. Buddhism teaches that this belief is a misunderstanding. Nothing essential is being taken away. What is falling apart was never permanent to begin with. When the mind releases attachment to status and role, a deep relief appears. Letting go of identity does not mean losing dignity. It means discovering a deeper dignity that does not depend on usefulness or recognition. When the mind no longer asks, "Who am I compared to before?" it begins to rest. Old age then becomes a time when the heart can finally stop performing. The Buddha taught that non-attachment is not indifference, it is freedom. When identity softens, compassion expands. One no longer needs to defend an image or protect a story. The heart becomes gentle with itself. This gentleness is not weakness. It is wisdom ripened through years of seeing clearly. In youth, identity is built. In old age, identity can be laid down. This is not a loss. It is a return to simple awareness, a return to being present without needing to be someone special. When identity loosens, comparison ends. When comparison ends, peace naturally arises. Old age becomes peaceful when the mind understands that it is not shrinking. It is unburdening itself. What falls away was weight. What remains is clarity. This is why in Buddhist wisdom, old age is not the fading of life, but the quiet opening of the heart. When craving grows quiet, old age becomes light. The Buddha taught that suffering does not come from what is missing, but from wanting things to be different from how they are. This wanting, this thirst, continues quietly throughout life. In youth, it is loud and visible. In old age, it often becomes silent, hidden beneath disappointment, restlessness, or regret. Yet its nature remains the same. Craving takes many forms. The craving to be strong again, the craving to be needed, the craving to relive moments that have already ended, the craving for comfort, attention, recognition, or control. In old age, when the world no longer responds as it once did, these cravings become painful, not because they are wrong desires, but because they can no longer be fulfilled. Buddhist wisdom teaches that craving does not fade on its own with time. It fades only through understanding. Old age becomes peaceful when craving is clearly seen and gently released. When the mind stops asking life to give back what it has already taken away, a deep calm appears. This calm does not come from having more, but from wanting less. Many people believe that peace comes from preserving pleasure. The Buddha taught the opposite. Peace comes from letting desire rest. When desire slows, contentment grows naturally. The mind no longer searches. It no longer negotiates with time. It no longer argues with reality. In this stillness, old age reveals its hidden gift. Craving keeps the mind leaning forward, even when the body must slow down. This creates inner conflict. Buddhism teaches that harmony returns when the mind learns to rest where the body already is. When this alignment happens, fatigue decreases, agitation softens, and the heart feels less crowded. In youth, craving drives life forward. In old age, craving can finally be understood. This is why the Buddha saw aging not as decline, but as opportunity. When desire loses its urgency, awareness deepens, simple moments become complete. Silence becomes nourishing. Being becomes enough. When craving fades, comparison fades with it. There is no longer a need to measure oneself against the past or against others. The mind stops reaching outward and begins to settle inward. This settling is not emptiness. It is fullness without demand. The Buddha taught that freedom is not found by fulfilling every desire, but by seeing through desire itself. Old age offers a rare clarity for this seeing. When the mind realizes that peace does not depend on conditions, it stops bargaining with life. This is when old age becomes gentle. Old age becomes peaceful, not because cravings disappear completely, but because they are no longer obeyed. The heart learns to watch desire arise and pass away without chasing it. In this watching, wisdom matures, and in this maturity, suffering loosens its grip. What remains is not boredom, but quiet joy, not excitement, but ease, not possession, but presence. This is why in Buddhist teaching, the softening of desire is not loss. It is liberation. When the mind rests in the present, Old age stops hurting. The Buddha taught that suffering lives in time. The mind moves endlessly between what has already passed and what has not yet arrived. In old age, this movement becomes heavier. Memories lengthen. The future feels uncertain. The present moment is often ignored, even though it is the only place where life is actually happening. Old age becomes painful when the mind lives in memory or fear, when it returns again and again to what the body used to be. The present feels lacking. When it worries about what may come, the heart tightens. Buddhism teaches that peace does not come from fixing the past or controlling the future. Peace comes from fully arriving here. Mindfulness is not an effort to concentrate. It is a gentle return. The Buddha taught awareness of breath, body, feelings, and mind as they are. In old age, distractions naturally lessen. The pace of life slows. This creates the perfect condition for mindfulness to deepen. When the mind stops rushing, it begins to see clearly. Each breath becomes a place to rest. Each movement becomes complete in itself. The body may feel weaker, but awareness grows stronger. When attention settles in the present moment, the mind stops struggling against time. Old age then feels less like waiting and more like living. The Buddha did not teach mindfulness to escape life, but to enter it fully. When awareness stays with what is happening now, regret loses its hold, fear loses its urgency. The mind no longer drags the weight of years behind it. It stands lightly in this moment. In the present moment, there is no old age. There is only sensation, breath, and awareness. Pain may exist, but suffering does not automatically follow. Buddhism makes a clear distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is part of the body. Suffering is created by the mind when it resists what is. When the mind rests in presence, resistance softens. The body is allowed to be as it is. Thoughts arise and pass without being chased. Feelings come and go without being judged. This acceptance is not resignation, it is understanding. Old age often brings silence. When mindfulness is present, this silence becomes nourishing instead of empty. In stillness, the mind recovers its natural clarity. There is no need to fill time. There is no need to be entertained. Being aware becomes enough. The Buddha taught that liberation is found in direct experience, not in stories. Old age removes many stories. When the mind no longer lives inside narration, it rests in awareness. This resting is peace. Old age becomes peaceful, not because problems disappear, but because the mind stops living elsewhere. When awareness remains with what is happening now, life no longer feels like something that has already passed. It feels alive, even in its quietness. This is why mindfulness is not merely a practice for old age. It is the home the mind finally learns to return to. When compassion replaces the self, old age becomes gentle. The Buddha taught that suffering tightens when the sense of me becomes rigid. Throughout life, the mind quietly revolves around itself. My body, my strength, my importance, my story. In youth, this self-focus is hidden by activity and ambition. In old age, when movement slows and roles fall away, the self becomes more visible, and so does its suffering. Old age becomes heavy when the mind keeps asking what it has lost, what can no longer be done, what respect has faded, what attention has shifted elsewhere. Buddhism teaches that this pain is not caused by aging, but by the self-centered view that remains unexamined. When everything is filtered through me, peace becomes difficult. The Buddha offered a different way of seeing. He taught compassion, not as kindness alone, but as a loosening of the self. When attention moves away from constant self-reference, the heart softens. Compassion is not something added to life. It is what remains when self-concern quiets. In old age, the conditions for compassion naturally increase. One has seen pain, One has known loss. One has experienced disappointment and change. These experiences, when understood, open the heart rather than harden it. Buddhism teaches that wisdom ripens into compassion, just as understanding ripens into calm. When compassion grows, the mind stops measuring itself. It stops asking whether it is ahead or behind. It stops comparing its present with its past. Instead, it begins to see others clearly, their struggles, their fears, their impermanence. In this seeing, loneliness dissolves. The heart feels connected without needing to be needed. Compassion also turns inward. The Buddha never taught harshness toward oneself. When the body weakens, self-judgment often increases. The mind criticizes slowness, forgetfulness, dependency. Compassion interrupts this cruelty. It allows the body to age without punishment. It allows the mind to rest without shame. Old age becomes peaceful when one no longer treats change as failure. Compassion sees aging as natural, not personal. When this understanding settles, the inner struggle softens. The heart becomes patient with the body. Patience becomes a form of love. The Buddha taught that all beings are subject to aging, sickness, and death. This truth does not isolate us. It unites us. When old age is understood in this way, it no longer feels like being left behind. It feels like sharing a universal condition. Compassion grows from this recognition. When compassion replaces self-focus, the need for control weakens. The mind no longer insists that life follow a certain shape. It becomes flexible, gentle, open. Old age then feels less like narrowing and more like opening. Compassion also dissolves resentment. Many people carry unresolved pain into old age, toward family, toward life, toward themselves. Buddhism teaches that resentment is a form of clinging. Compassion loosens this grip. It does not justify harm, but it releases the heart from carrying it. As compassion deepens, forgiveness becomes possible. Not forced forgiveness, but natural release. The heart understands that everyone acted within their own confusion. This understanding frees enormous inner space. In that space, peace settles. The Buddha taught that when the self is seen as a process rather than a possession, compassion flows naturally. There is no rigid boundary between me and others. Old age supports this realization because the illusion of control weakens. What remains is shared humanity. In compassion, there is no urgency, no competition, no demand. This absence of pressure is deeply restful. Old age becomes gentle, not because life is easy, but because the heart is no longer hard. Compassion also changes how time is experienced. When the self is not the center, there is no panic about how much time remains. Each moment stands on its own. Each encounter is complete. Time no longer threatens. The Buddha did not teach compassion as a moral obligation, but as a natural outcome of wisdom. When understanding deepens, cruelty becomes impossible, especially toward oneself. Old age then becomes a time of softness, not struggle. This softness is not weakness. It is strength without tension. It is clarity without harshness. It is awareness that does not push or pull. In this state, the heart feels safe. Even as the body changes, old age becomes peaceful when the mind no longer asks, "What is happening to me?" and begins to rest in, "This is the nature of life." Compassion makes this acceptance warm rather than cold. When compassion fills the heart, old age is no longer about decline. It becomes a period of quiet generosity, of presence, understanding, and patience. One may give less in action, but more in being. This is why in Buddhist wisdom, compassion is not an addition to aging. It is the transformation of aging itself. When the self loosens, suffering loosens. When compassion remains, peace remains. Old age becomes gentle because the heart has finally learned how to stop defending itself. And in that undefended state, there is rest. When the heart embraces simplicity, old age becomes free. The Buddha taught that suffering grows wherever life becomes complicated. The mind collects, stores, and protects far more than it needs. Desires multiply, opinions harden, possessions gather, stories repeat. In youth, this complexity feels purposeful. In old age, it begins to feel exhausting. Old age becomes heavy when the mind continues to carry what is no longer necessary. Old roles, old conflicts, old expectations, old habits of thinking. Buddhism teaches that freedom is not found by adding more understanding, but by letting go of what no longer serves clarity. Simplicity is not poverty. Simplicity is not poverty. It is alignment. It is life reduced to what is essential. The Buddha lived simply not because life was lacking, but because nothing extra was needed for peace. Old age naturally invites this same movement. If the invitation is accepted, the body slows down. Energy becomes precious. Attention narrows. These changes are often resisted. Yet from a Buddhist perspective, they are not losses. They are signals. Signals that life is guiding the mind inward. When fewer things can be done, fewer things need to be done. When fewer roles remain, fewer identities must be maintained. Old age becomes peaceful when one stops filling time out of habit. When silence is allowed without fear. When days are no longer judged by productivity. Buddhism teaches that stillness is not emptiness. It is clarity without distraction. Simplicity also means releasing mental clutter. Old age often brings a flood of memories. The mind revisits past moments again and again. Some are pleasant, some are painful. Buddhism teaches that memory itself is not the problem. Attachment to memory is. When the mind stops replaying the past to define itself, a great burden falls away. One does not need to keep proving that life had meaning. Meaning is not stored in memory. It is experienced in awareness. The Buddha taught renunciation not as rejection of the world, but as freedom from being owned by it. In old age, renunciation becomes gentle and natural. There is less hunger for excess, less need for noise, less interest in accumulation. When the heart allows this simplicity, peace grows quietly. The mind stops chasing stimulation. It stops defending preferences. It becomes content with what is present. Old age becomes difficult when the mind still wants life to feel full in the old way. Buddhism teaches that fullness changes form. What once came from excitement now comes from ease. What once came from ambition now comes from acceptance. Simplicity also softens fear. When life is uncluttered, there is less to protect, less to lose, less to manage. The mind relaxes. Old age then feels less fragile. The Buddha taught that liberation is near when grasping is minimal. Old age offers this condition naturally. The challenge is not to resist it. When the mind stops grasping at possessions, recognition, or outcomes, it begins to taste freedom. Simplicity changes the relationship with the body. The body is no longer treated as a project to improve or fix endlessly. It is cared for but not controlled. When this shift happens, frustration decreases. The body is allowed to age without argument. Old age also simplifies relationships. The need to impress fades. The need to convince fades. What remains is presence, listening, quiet companionship. Buddhism teaches that presence is the highest form of generosity. As simplicity deepens, gratitude becomes natural. Not forced gratitude, but quiet appreciation. The mind sees that little is needed to be at ease. A breath, light, a moment of awareness. These are enough. The Buddha taught that clinging multiplies suffering. Simplicity dissolves clinging by reducing the points of attachment. When life is simple, suffering has fewer places to attach. Old age becomes peaceful when the mind no longer tries to make life bigger. It allows life to become clearer. This clarity is not dull, it is luminous in its quietness. Simplicity also prepares the mind for the final truth. The Buddha taught that letting go is the path to peace. Old age is not the time to hold tighter. It is the time to open the hand. When the heart opens, fear loosens. When fear loosens, peace appears. Old age then feels less like an ending and more like a gentle completion. The Buddha did not teach us to fear simplicity. He taught us to trust it. When the unnecessary falls away, what remains is enough. Old age becomes free when the mind finally understands this truth, that peace does not require a full life, only a clear one. When the mind fully accepts the nature of life, old age becomes deep peace. The Buddha taught that peace is not something added at the end of life. It is something revealed when misunderstanding falls away. Old age is the time when this revelation becomes possible, because illusions have less strength and reality becomes unavoidable. When the mind no longer turns away from truth, peace appears naturally. Throughout life, the mind avoids one certainty, that all conditioned things must end. Youth distracts us from this truth. Activity hides it. Ambition covers it. Old age slowly removes these coverings. The body weakens, time becomes visible, the horizon shortens. This is not cruelty, it is clarity. Old age becomes painful when the mind continues to resist this clarity, when it demands certainty where none exists, when it seeks permanence in what is temporary. Buddhism teaches that suffering is born in this resistance. Peace is born when resistance ends. The Buddha never taught denial of aging, sickness, or death. He taught understanding. To understand does not mean to become fearful. It means to stop fighting what has always been true. When the mind finally stops arguing with the nature of life, it becomes quiet. Acceptance in Buddhism is not resignation. It is wisdom without struggle. It is seeing things as they are, without demanding that they be different. Old age offers the perfect ground for this seeing, because life no longer pretends to be endless. When the mind accepts aging, fear begins to dissolve, not all at once, but gently. Fear feeds on avoidance. When nothing is avoided, fear loses its strength. The heart begins to trust the flow of life, even as it moves toward its completion. The Buddha taught that birth already contains death, just as morning already contains evening. This truth is not meant to darken life. It is meant to free it from illusion. When old age arrives, this teaching becomes lived experience rather than concept. Old age becomes peaceful when the mind no longer sees death as failure. Death is not the opposite of life. It is part of its movement. Buddhism teaches that clinging to existence creates suffering, just as clinging to non-existence does. Freedom lies in letting go of both. As acceptance deepens, the mind stops measuring how much time remains. Time is no longer an enemy. Each moment stands complete. A short moment fully lived is not inferior to a long life half resisted. The Buddha taught that awareness does not age. The body changes, but awareness remains present. When the mind rests in awareness rather than identification with form, aging loses its threat. There is a deep peace in knowing that what observes change is not itself changing in the same way. Old age becomes peaceful when identity loosens completely. There is no longer a need to protect a story. The mind stops asking who it has been or what it has achieved. These questions fall silent. What remains is simple knowing. In this knowing, fear of loss fades. There is nothing left to defend, nothing left to secure. The heart becomes open and undefended. This openness is not vulnerability. It is fearlessness without aggression. The Buddha taught that suffering ends when ignorance ends. Old age can be the time when ignorance finally weakens, because life has shown its true face. When wisdom meets experience, understanding becomes steady. Acceptance also transforms how pain is experienced. Physical discomfort may arise, but mental resistance decreases. The Buddha distinguished between the pain of the body and the suffering of the mind. When the mind no longer adds fear, complaint, or story to sensation, pain does not dominate awareness. Old age often brings solitude. When acceptance is present, solitude becomes silence rather than loneliness. Silence becomes spacious. In this space, the mind rests naturally. There is no need to fill it. The Buddha taught that clinging creates becoming, and becoming creates suffering. When acceptance matures, becoming slows. There is no urgency to become something else. Old age becomes a time of being, rather than striving. As striving ends, gratitude arises quietly. Not gratitude for circumstances, but for clarity. The heart sees life as it is, without distortion. This seeing is peaceful. Acceptance also allows reconciliation with oneself, with life, with what could not be changed. Regret loses its grip, because the mind understands that conditions were always unfolding according to causes, not personal failure. The Buddha taught dependent origination to show that nothing stands alone. Old age reveals this truth clearly. One sees how life unfolded, moment by moment. Blame dissolves. Understanding replaces it. When acceptance is complete, the fear of endings transforms. Endings are no longer seen as threats, but as natural transitions. The heart does not rush ahead of itself. It stays where it is. Old age becomes peaceful when the mind no longer seeks escape. There is nowhere to escape to. Life is here. Ending is also here. Both are part of the same unfolding. The Buddha taught that peace is found when the fires of craving, aversion, and ignorance cool. Old age offers the chance for these fires to finally burn low. When they do, the heart feels cool, steady, and clear. In this clarity, old age becomes a period of deep dignity. Not the dignity of control, but the dignity of understanding. One stands in truth without needing to explain it. The mind becomes simple, quiet, spacious. There is nothing to add and nothing to remove. This simplicity is the peace the Buddha pointed to. Old age becomes peaceful, not because life has been conquered, but because it has been understood. The mind no longer resists the way things are. In that non-resistance, suffering ends. This is not a special state. It is the natural state revealed when grasping ends. Old age is not the cause of peace. Wisdom is. Old age simply makes wisdom unavoidable. When understanding ripens fully, there is nothing left to fear. Not aging, not change, not even ending. The heart rests. This is why in Buddhist wisdom, old age is not the closing of life, but the opening of truth. And where truth is fully seen, peace is complete. Old age does not arrive to take life away. It arrives to remove what was never essential. When craving weakens, peace becomes visible. When clinging ends, suffering has nowhere to remain. What once felt like loss reveals itself as lightness. The Buddha did not teach us to fear aging, but to misunderstand it less. When understanding deepens, resistance fades. When resistance fades, peace stands on its own. Old age becomes gentle, not because the body improves, but because the heart no longer argues with truth. Nothing more is required. Nothing is missing. This is the quiet freedom the Buddha pointed toward, not at the end of life, but in the way life is finally seen.